Today, I'm bringing you a discussion with Oliver Gunasekara, the CEO and co-founder of Impossible Metals.
Each one of those 40 areas has something like $250 billion worth of metals on the seabed floor.
Wow. They are building autonomous underwater robots to hover around the ocean floor and pick up rocks that are full of critical minerals.
Some countries have more than one area. China has 5 areas. The US actually passed a law predating this UN law that allows US companies to mine anywhere in the ocean. I care a lot about the world's access to these metals. Right now, China controls between 40 and 90% of this stuff. It's really scary.
Wow, what a conversation. That may end up going down as one of my favorite podcasts of all time because the technology and the opportunity are incredible. Welcome back to the Clean Techies podcast. I'm Silas Maynor, your favorite clean tech headhunter. All right, today I'm bringing you a discussion with Oliver Gunasekara, the CEO and co-founder of Impossible Metals, where they are building autonomous underwater robots to hover around the ocean floor and pick up rocks that are full of critical minerals. And I do apologize if I mispronounce your name, Oliver. All right, there is a lot that I could say about this episode, but I'm just going to say 2 specific things. Number one, this is Oliver's 4th company. His last venture was actually sold to AMD in 2018, so you can kind of imagine the caliber of founder that he is. And his other 2 ventures, like this one other one that spun out of this one actually. So this technically is his 2nd venture was sold to AMD. Number 2 is the amount of metals in the ocean to be collected is well north of $18 trillion. Yes, $18 trillion is just the approximate value of one particular region of the ocean where these metals are just laying around basically like little rocks on the ocean floor. So listen on to hear their technology, his advice on building teams, fundraising, and also be sure to listen for a little bit of a lesson on how international law works when it comes to the ocean and minerals found therein. Some very fascinating things going on there. I won't spoil it for you. Just listen on. And before the show starts, shout out to our sponsors, Climate Finance Solutions, helping clean tech startups land grant funding or other non-dilutive funding options in the US and Europe, and Earth Tech Talent, the search firm that I run, helping clean tech startups hire top talent, but without it costing a fortune. All right, enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the podcast, Oliver. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
I'm super excited to have you. So today, you're the CEO today of and co-founder of Impossible Metals, but this is your 4th company. So I do want to kick things off by asking, like, what kind of childhood does somebody have to have in order to become an entrepreneur? Not 1, but 4 times.
Yeah, I think you get addictive. Like I didn't really know anything about entrepreneurship and companies when I grew up. I grew up in England, and I just realized over time, maybe in the recent, last 20 years or so, that I really like starting things from scratch. I like doing the first. I like, winning those first customers, coming up with this new technology, opening up new markets. It's just something I really enjoy. I would say, have a pretty high threshold for pain. Entrepreneurial and startup stuff is not easy. It's difficult. It's not as glamorous as people think.
When you first started companies and you encountered that pain, was that something that was difficult for you to work through at the beginning? And then did it become easier over time? Or was it always like, hey, this is just a hard day. I know I'm going to make it through. There'll be better days ahead.
It's always hard. I wouldn't say I've particularly got better at it. I think I am naturally persistent, probably a bit stubborn, don't like to give up. That's just kind of the character that I am. But I would say if I knew how hard it was before I started, I probably wouldn't do it. And although it is my 4th company, you kind of forget about the pain unless you're in it. You remember the good stuff and not so much the bad stuff.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. I think you kind of get removed from it, so you may either romanticize it or just not think about it because you're addicted to starting things, as you said. I am curious though. I mean, your companies have done well, so what does it take to shift from that mindset of starting something and getting something going versus sticking with it till you need to, until saying, hey, it's time for me now to leave, but I've stuck with it long enough that it's actually working?
Yeah, I guess in the case that I've been involved in, that's kind of happened organically. We got acquired, or I started a standards organization, and then I kind of transferred to a different role in the company. And so, 4 isn't that many. 2 are still current, active. I think a lot of startups fail because people give up. And so that's something that I'm kind of not willing to do. I mean,
Mhm.
there may come a time, but I think whilst you can, you need to keep going because you see the world a little differently to others, and hopefully it's just a matter of timing before things come
Mhm.
as you expect.
Yeah, that's the thing about timing is something I find challenging because it's like, when you have a certain level of intelligence about how startups work and how businesses work, you start to recognize, is this ever going to be a timing thing? Will there ever be a time where this kind of really starts to work, or is it actually better to pursue other opportunities? I think it depends on the circumstances and, are you there for the mission? Are you there for other reasons? Like I started my recruitment consultancy because I wanted to pay the bills and not have to report to anybody, right? So it's like, hey, am I maximizing for ROI? Probably not, right? Like I'm maximizing for other things. So, it's a little different, I guess, a calculation, if you will. But I do appreciate hearing from people like you who've really been through the gamut because it's just not every day that people have those exits and then still remain, going back at it, right? So I appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing today. We'll focus particularly on Impossible Metals. So what is Impossible Metals at its very simplest explanation?
Yeah, it's a next generation mining company. So we are attempting to deliver to the market the metals that we need for decarbonization, defense, AI data centers, just general infrastructure, and do it in a way that is both less expensive, less environmentally and socially impactful, and can be quite rapid to market.
And so where are you getting these metals from?
So what's new is the location. So historically, mining has been done on land. We've done it forever. We've had a Bronze Age, etc. But we are going to the ocean. So we're going after these potato-sized rocks that I'm holding here that lie in huge quantities on the seabed floor. And we've invented new technology that can preserve the habitat while still picking up these rocks.
Amazing. So I get this is just like super wild to me. How did you decide that this was something you're going to work on? Where was the origin of understanding this was even an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it was again timing. I had sold my last company, which was a semiconductor company, to AMD, kind of the middle of 2019, and was kind of looking at things to do. Was going to be kind of semi-retired, go traveling. The pandemic happened. I was kind of locked down, more time on my hands than I knew really what to do with, and started to get more interested in the energy transition. We had terrible wildfires here in California, and that kind of accelerated my interest. And I discovered these rocks on the seabed floor. Discovered a company that was called Deep Green. They've since gone on to become public through a SPAC now known as the Metals Company, and got fascinated by their business, by the technology they were using. And the more I dug in, I could see that this tech fundamentally hadn't changed in 50 years. It was the fundamentally dredging tractor that is vacuuming up the seabed floor. And it seemed to me that we could use 21st century technology to create a next generation collection.
Hmm. So in general, this company that you heard of, they had been already working on deep sea mining of metals for a while, just using old tech. So how old is this industry? Because to me, I haven't heard much about this except for you guys. To me, it sounds all new.
Well, it's new in the fact that no one's yet in production, but it's old in the fact that people have been seriously researching and spending effort understanding the marine environment for over 50 years. So, mining is quite regulated. It's not that you can just build a mine and start, digging stuff up. You have to do environmental reviews, you have to do permitting, you have to raise capital. And so a number of companies have been working down that process. And in fact, even in the 70s, there was a consortium of companies that worked together to build a collection system and test it in the deep ocean. But no one's yet into production, but the metals company is quite close. They have said they'll be in production end of 27. We think we'll be there in 2028.
Okay, wow. So you guys got started later, but you'll be right on their tail, right? So just maybe help us understand a little bit more. So you have these kind of, I'm guessing, like underwater drones, I guess you would call them,
Yep.
that you're then going deep into the ocean and picking up the rocks and then bring them to the top, and then what happens?
Yeah. So maybe just a little more on that. So instead of using one big dredging tractor that has a big riser system that is pumping up the nodules, these rocks from the seabed floor, we're using a fleet of drones that are all battery powered. And these drones are hovering, so they don't land. And they use AI and computer vision to selectively pick up the rocks one by one with an array of arms and store them inside. And that allows us two massive environmental benefits. One, if we see large life that we can detect, something bigger than a millimeter, something like an octopus or a deep sea coral, etc., or sponge, then we can quarantine that area and just avoid disturbing it by
Mm.
just flying over the top. And then most of the life down there is actually microscopic. It's bacteria, it's single cell organisms. We can't see that, right? You need a microscope. And so we can choose as a policy to only take, say, 40% of the material, leaving 60% behind. Now, once the vehicle is full, it uses the buoyancy engine. That's a technology we invented to float to near the surface of the ship. And then we have an automated docking system with a smart hook that docks the robot and brings it onto the ship. Once it's on the ship, we empty the payload. The nodules have a little door at the bottom of the robot. They fall into the conveyor system on the ship. The battery is swapped automatically, so we can put a new fully charged battery. Any maintenance is performed, and now the vehicle can be redeployed. And we would have, in time, hundreds of these vehicles being operated, and each vehicle has something like a 4-hour mission time. So every 4 hours, we can deliver the full payload of rocks or nodules to the bulk carrier, the ship.
This episode is brought to you by Climate Finance Solutions, the firm helping climate tech companies win the major government grants that drive their scale and impact. Since 2020, they've won over $1.6 billion in public funding for their clients, with a 90% success rate on the dollars that they've applied for. Their team has also helped win more than 500 million euros in European funding and manage over $275 million in grant projects. Their team has also helped win more than 500 million euros in European funding and managed over $275 million in grant projects. With a global team of 27 experts, CFS supports climate innovators through every stage of the funding lifecycle, from strategy to proposals to project execution. They also have a grant identification platform that enables real-time monitoring and custom matching of opportunities with alerts as new grants are released. If you're a climate investor, accelerator, or ecosystem builder, you can even join their partnership program to unlock pro bono support for your portfolio companies. Learn more at climatefinancesolutions.com. All right, back to the show. And how deep are we talking about that these things can go? Like what kind of part of the oceans can you work in?
So the reason we have to go pretty deep is that these rocks only form in deep water. So we have to go 4 to 6 kilometers, which is about 3 to 4 miles. Very, very deep. We have to build the robot in using materials that can survive that immense pressure. So this is about 600 times the atmospheric pressure. So unless you use steel and titanium, everything would implode instantly.
Interesting. Now, just out of curiosity, the alternative technology with the dredging machines, are those remotely operated as well, or are those run by like people in a submarine or something like that?
No, they're remotely operated, but they have a physical cable that provides power and video feeds, and they have a pilot and a whole suite of people on the ship driving them.
I see.
Whereas our systems are fully automated.
Wow.
The robot is not being driven. It's making its own decisions based on the mission that we downloaded.
Yeah. So this is fascinating. How do you discover where these mineral deposits are? I mean, I don't know if that's what you call them, rock deposit, or what you call them.
Yeah. Fortunately, we don't do that, but because others do that. And, mining has kind of 3 phases. Prospecting, which is what you described. Where are they? Well, that was done over 50 years ago. We know roughly where these areas are. The next is exploration. This is where a company applies and gets an exclusive area. And now they can do marine research in that area. What actually lives down there? How many rocks are there? What is the grades? What's the economic value? And so there are globally something like 40 exploration areas in the ocean. Each one is the size of Portugal. So it's a huge area. And then the final phase is what we're focused on, which is the actual commercial mining. Once you've collected all that data, typically for 5 or more years, you can apply for a commercial recovery permit where you take that data, you take it with the technology, and you get permission to actually go production mining.
So the exploration companies, how do they make money? Do they make money by like mapping it all out and then selling that kind of to you as the next part of the project owner, or how does that work?
So they basically are collecting the data so that they can be mining companies in the future.
So they can get permits, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay,
So this is kind of the cost required for any mining before you can get to production.
got
Now,
it.
each one of those 40 areas has something like $250 billion worth of metals on the seabed floor.
Wow.
So in this one large area between Hawaii and Mexico, there are 16 licensed areas. It's called the Clarendon-Clipperton Zone. It's estimated to have over $18 trillion worth of metals. So you can see spending 50, $60 million collecting the environmental data over 5 years when you're going to get a payback of 250, billion means it's well worthwhile.
Well, and it's also not necessarily super risky, right? Because it's not like it's mostly just they have to collect the data, they have to, get the permits, but it's not like you're panning for gold and you're not sure what's down there. They already
Right.
have identified the area, so it seems like a bit of a no-brainer. But so in order for you guys then to operate in these areas, maybe we can talk about this a little bit. Did you have to then purchase one of those companies, those exploration companies, because they have the permits, and then you can start mining?
Yeah, although being a startup and wanting to be capital efficient, we're looking at more of an intimate partnership, kind of joint venture,
I see.
where we provide the technology and they provide the licensed area, and we share in the upsides. So that's what we call phase one of our go to market or resource access. We have just recently secured our own application so that we have our own area, and that was sponsored by the Kingdom of Bahrain from the Middle East. And so, although the area is adjacent to Mexico and Hawaii, the sponsorship comes because this is a quirk of how international law works. It can come from any country. And so, as a phase two strategy, we will have our own area, but we now have to collect the 5 years of environmental work.
Mm. So, okay, so back up a little bit. You said that Bahrain is sponsoring you in another area that's not connected to Bahrain. So, how does the this work? How does the law work? You said somebody has to sponsor you in any country. Only a country can take the
Only
minerals
a
out.
country can sponsor a company. The country has to be one of the 169 countries that have signed the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Hmm.
So UNCLOS, or the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, is a big law that most countries have signed, 169 plus the EU have signed, and that's what establishes the laws on the ocean. And part of the laws establishes mineral rights. And to secure mineral rights, you have to be sponsored by a country that has signed that law.
Okay, so I'm curious. I don't know if we want to get too far into the weeds here, but or into the seaweeds here, I should say. My jokes. This is why I'm not a comedian. But the how does it like? What's the law actually state? Like, what is the mineral rights piece? Because I can imagine if this is something that's out there, especially once technology like yours becomes, widely available, wouldn't countries just be rushing to snatch all this up, or do they have some sort of sharing clause? Like, what exactly does that look like?
So there are already 31 licenses awarded over 19 countries.
And there's
So
how many areas again? 40?
there are 40 global, but some of them are within the exclusive economic zone. So
Okay.
in the ocean, there's two legal frameworks. You are within 200 miles of the coast of the country. That belongs to the country.
Okay.
So no difference if it was on land. If you're beyond the 200 nautical miles, then you're in what's called the area beyond national jurisdiction, or the high seas or international waters. This is where this rule kicks in.
Okay, got it. And that's where the 40, that's what the 40 are.
So no, 40 covers both, but
Oh, okay, got it.
31 of them are in international
I
waters.
see. And do they break up all of these areas into like smaller areas, right? So it's not like one person has monopoly over the whole thing, or is that usually how it works? Once they get the access to work there, that's theirs.
So typically the maximum size you can apply for is 75,000 square kilometers,
Okay.
which is, I don't have it in miles or acres, but it's the size of Portugal. And
Yeah,
so everybody applies for the maximum
I
size
see. I
because that's
see.
what you're allowed to do. And some countries have more than one area. China has 5 areas, for instance.
Interesting.
So there isn't a limit to how many areas you can have. The UK has 2. I think Russia has 4, if I remember correctly. India has 3. Japan has 1. France has 1. As I said, there are
What about the
90.
U.S.? I gotta know about the U.S., man. You gotta tell me.
So the US is one of the very few countries that hasn't signed this law,
Oh, what?
which means that that's why we had to kind of go to Bahrain, because we
Uh,
cannot be sponsored, but although we're a US company, we cannot be directly sponsored.
Interesting. Okay. Do you have any insight as to why this wasn't signed? Is this a recent thing, or this is like this has
No,
been like a long, long time ago?
this dates back to the 1980s, and I think the US was not comfortable ceding sovereignty to a UN created organization.
Oh, because it would include the areas around their country, around the U.S.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that there've been some very recent developments in the fact that the US actually passed a law predating this UN law that allows US companies to mine anywhere in the ocean. And President Trump signed an executive order in April that is now saying we're going to go with that. So there are kind of some benefits right now because the UN, although it works with everybody, it is being held up because some countries don't want to make this happen because they're worried about competition with domestic mining. This is very inside baseball, but right now you have a dual track where the metals company that I mentioned earlier, they were in the UN framework, but they've now hitched their focus on direct domestic US, even though it's in international waters.
So they're trying to go both routes, basically. But
They've kind of burnt their bridges. I don't think
mm,
they now have an option. They started in the UN ISA, that what's called the International Seabed Authority, which is the UN regulator. But because that regulator hadn't been able to finish the rules, they decided we're not waiting. We're going to now apply directly to the US.
I see. So they're kind of committed to the U.S. side of things. Okay. Wow, this is fascinating. I like this. I mean, just want to back up too. I mean, this is quite interesting. It's almost like you're. I mean, it's not really buried treasure. It kind of is, right? But it's not. It's not quite the same. But you're basically running a pirate operation, if you will, in the right sense, not
Yeah.
in the looting sense, but kind of
Yeah.
pillaging the areas that there's nothing going on down there. That's really fascinating. Man, I want to like get your take on this. Like when you wake up and you realize that you're working on this stuff every day, like what does it make you think?
Well, I love things that have a lot of new technology. I mean, I'm a technologist at heart. I lived 20 years in Silicon Valley, spent a lot of time in semiconductors. I love brand new things. I love the latest phone, the latest technology. And, we've invented some incredible technology that never existed. So that's super motivating. The second thing is I care a lot about the world's access to these metals. Like
Hmm.
right now, China controls between 40 and 90% of this stuff. It's really scary. They have spent the last 25 years just taking control of all of these mines and processing around the world. And as we saw with the recent trade negotiations, they can just turn it off. And suddenly we can't make cars, we can't make fighter planes. It's a real problem. So as an American, I became an American citizen. I want us to make not to be under China control.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I see the seabed as an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
The problem is, all of these metals in Africa and Indonesia and elsewhere, China controls them. It's too
Hmm.
late. But in the seabed, although China has a strong position, it's not yet dominant. So we have an opportunity. So
Hmm.
that's super motivating. And then, the more you look at how we get our metals today, like we have pictures on our website of Indonesia and islands before and after the mining. Like the whole rainforest is completely destroyed, because the nickel laterite ore that you want to get at is just below the rainforest. So literally remove everything. And
Hmm.
that rainforest, not only did it have indigenous tribes living there, but it had huge amounts of biodiversity, biomass, species, life, carbon, all gone. And then the people that remain, their water is polluted, they can't fish, sometimes they're forced to work in these mines. I want to do better. The world, our whole society relies on mining. It's not understood, but if you look around, if it wasn't grown, if you just look where you are today, everything you see, if it was not grown, it was mined. So it means there is zero civilization, there is zero technology without mining, but yet we've outsourced it. And so there are a lot of environmental and social issues with that. There's the geopolitical issues that China controls it. So that's really motivating. I think what we're doing is going to be really good for the planet. And then finally, I think we can make a huge amount of money. I mean, the total addressable market for nickel, cobalt, copper, manganese this year, $500 billion, $500 billion is spent on these four metals today. By 2035, it will be 1 trillion a year. And so we have an opportunity to take a big slice of that in time.
I am super excited to share that we at Clean Techies are going to be making content at the upcoming Hack Summit in New York City. This is returning to New Lab December 10th and 11th. And here with me to tell us more about Hack Summit is Laura Hodgkiss from Climate Hack.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to just break down a little bit more about this summit. A lot of people are not familiar. So in brief, can you just tell us what is Hack Summit?
Yes, absolutely. So we're really excited. Last year we came to New York for the first time, having hosted 5 events in Switzerland. We had a fantastic success, amazing people that were joining. It was investors, founders, corporates, CVCs and operators, all within the climate deep tech space, with a real enthusiasm and commitment to collaborate. And it's really a chance for everyone to come together. We want to accelerate more investment into climate deep tech, unlock those opportunities. We want more startups to be seen by investors, and investors and operators to find their next scale-up partner, find new partnerships to grow, collaborations that spark at the Hack Summit, then go on to create great success.
Especially the focus on the deep tech side of things is really important because it's very difficult to move these things forward. So Climate Hack is the organization that's putting this on. Could you tell us a little bit more about Climate Hack specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So Climate Hack is a global community. The team is based in Switzerland, but we have ambassadors who work all around the world with us, and they're putting on local free events in their communities. The aim is really to bring together people that could be students, it can be investors, startups and founders coming together. And then throughout the year, we're writing different editorial content to connect the dots between investors and startups so that more people can understand what's going on, what are these technologies, and how can they get involved in the climate tech space. And the Hack Summit is really the occasion where everyone can come together twice a year now for the Hack Summit to be able to have those exchanges and get together.
Can you tell us a little bit more about who is going to be there? Any particular names you want to mention, or generally the type of people who will show up?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a wide range of founders working across the climate deep tech space, and they're going to be joining us for fireside chats with partners from the VCs that are backing them as well to uncover their journey. So for example, we have Cody Fink, who is the co-founder and CEO of Brimstone. He's going to be joining Rachel Slabow, who's a partner at DCVC. And then we have, for example, Liz Dennett from Enderlith, and she's going to be speaking to Deborah Zajac of SOSV to talk about her scale up and growth. And then also we can learn about what's happening at SOSV. We have Sampriti Bhattacharya, who is building America's first all-electric hydrofoiling vessel. And then I'm also personally excited about Laureen Meru, who's the founder and CEO of Hertha Metals. I'm sure you probably saw as well, she recently came out of stealth with 17 million. And now she's forging the future of steel.
Yeah, there's so many really fascinating companies. What are you most excited for about Hack Summit this year particularly?
It's a really exciting moment when you enter, and all of these incredible founders and these investors and these operators. It's that real energy in the room, I think, that sets it apart from other conferences. You know, the most senior partners from the VC funds or the Series B, Series C founders are really willing to talk to the earlier stage founders or make time for everyone. And I think that's really what the climate deep tech community is. It's really, really powerful.
Who should apply to come to the Hack Summit?
So the Hack Summit is the perfect event for founders that are fundraising. It's for investors that are looking to find what's new and next that's happening in the climate deep tech space. And it's also open for CVCs that are looking to partner with startups and operators that are working in the space. If they share our passion and excitement for scaling deep tech solutions, then they should be in the room.
And where can people apply to come to the Hack Summit?
So hacksummitny.com is the website to go. We've got the sign up there.
Yeah, it was as soon as I saw that this was happening, I was like, man, I have to go, because half of your main speakers have been on the podcast already. So it's a perfect fit for us. But no, I'm really excited for this, and I hope, just encourage everybody, if you have the opportunity, come to this summit to learn from founders who have already scaled to a very large extent. Maybe you need to learn from somebody who's further along, or you've got some lessons to share with other founders earlier in their journey. So apply to come today. You heard it. The link will be in the description, and we hope to see you there. Yeah, I think this is really fascinating. I mean, I can imagine that I would be very happy to smile ear to ear every day, waking up thinking about just the interesting opportunity you have here, and like all of the other things that kind of come together to make a very motivating day, right? That you're helping with national security, you're helping secure access outside of China, you're doing it in a way that's better for the environment. You don't have to cut down a rainforest to do this. And I'm also curious, we can get into this a little bit. I believe it would be also cheaper than typical mining. So maybe let's talk about the cost of extraction per ton, I guess I would assume is what you measure it by.
Yeah.
Talk about that compared to traditional, on-land mining.
Yeah, we have a really good story there. And, what drives the economics of a mine is how much of the valuable stuff is in the rocks that you dig up, the ore, versus waste. That's one of the biggest factors. And the reality is that on land, you get one or two metals. And because we've mined all the good stuff, we're left with less good, meaning lower grade. So copper grades of 0.5%. Nickel grades of fraction of a percent. In the ocean, this one potato-sized rock that we do not have to cut or blast or tunnel, literally think of golf balls on a driving range we have to pick up, has 4 metals. And all of them are super high grade. So nickel at about 1.2 to 1.3%, copper at 1%, cobalt at about 0.2%, and manganese at about 27%. So that combined together means that it's really valuable ore because you get all 4 metals at very high grades. And then you factor into the fact that if you were going to a new mine, by definition, not only is it low grade, but it's also remote. Because if it was local, you already mined it. So imagine the middle of Africa. Well, there's no road, there's no power, there's no infrastructure for workers. All of that's got to be built and paid for, and it takes time. And that goes into the cost. So we're looking at things like an all-in sustaining cost, which is a way a mining company compares itself, of around 10 times less than the average nickel mine last year. So the average nickel mine was $15,000, just below a metric ton. We would be about $1,500 a metric ton. So that's a huge cost advantage.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I just want to make sure I write this down, that the unit economics are crazy comparatively. That's really fascinating. I guess also with this, I want to make sure I understand too. Is your business model selling the metals? Like, do you refine
Yes.
it? Like, what happens after you've extracted them? What's your actual business model there?
Yeah, we want to sell the high quality metals. And so there is an onshore step where you take these nodules, these rocks, and they have to then be processed, where you extract those metals at high quality with low impurities so that they can be used in an AI data center or a battery or some wiring. And so we want to work with partners in what the industry calls a tolling relationship, where we deliver the ore, the rocks, and they deliver to us the high quality processed metals for us to sell directly to our customer.
Got it. Okay, so the refiner is still a service provider in a way. They're getting paid a cost per ton to refine.
Exactly.
And then you've got the extracted metals, which are then sold to producers of goods.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Is a lot of that, or is that capacity to refine these metals that you're looking at, is that existent in the US currently?
No, unfortunately, this is another area where the US has outsourced. Over the last 25 years, the majority of this has gone to China. But there are countries like Japan, Indonesia, Australia, Canada that do have capabilities. Now, each ore body is different, so there would need to be some modifications. But in Japan, one of the companies there has proven that they can process the first step of smelting, basically a rotary kiln, the nodules to extract the manganese.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Just out of curiosity, on a sidebar, I don't want to go too far down this hole, but is there a lot of push to refine some of the stuff in the U.S. now? Are they working on that?
Yeah, this administration is very focused on that because they know it's not enough to just have the mines. You need to have the processing, but it's capital intensive, energy intensive. It's going to need significant permits to build this infrastructure. It takes time, but there are multiple executive orders, even in the last administration, trying to stimulate and encourage
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, I could imagine that the challenge might be the talent that knows how to build these things. You probably have to import them from elsewhere and get them to build these things. So we'll see. I mean, again, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much. We did talk about some of the critical minerals actually in a couple of recent episodes. So this has been a theme these past months here talking about metals. But one other thing I want to ask about is what about the data play? Because I mean, if you guys are down there like getting certain kind of information from the seabed, I can imagine that there a data play as well to the business model.
I don't think so. We will probably just open source all
Mm-hmm.
the data that we collect. We are likely to detect new species of life because it's expensive to go and explore and but we will just open the video data and the sensor data for scientists to access. Our AI detection for life doesn't have to have pre-seen. It's just looking for nodules or seabed, and anything else we just assume is life. So we don't have to have pre-seen what species we encounter. But with time and labeling, we think we'll be able to, augment the data with, the video data with actually showing this species was detected at this time at this location.
Yeah, I mean, just make sure that you do have some program in there that tells you when you found the lost city of Atlantis, so that way you don't share that part. Okay, tell me about that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go
I
visit.
mean, there's non-zero chance we might discover shipwrecks that
I was
could
gonna
have.
say that could be interesting. That there's got to be some things there like that are unknown, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if we find an alien spaceship, we'll keep it to ourselves.
Yeah, tell Joe Rogan. He'll love to hear about that. It's a good reason to come on his podcast. Okay, so we talked about this. We talked about. I think we've talked about the most things there. You already mentioned. Is it just the four types of metal that come out that you can find in all these deposits, or is that just like the most common one?
No, the nodules have things like iron and silica
Mm-hmm.
in there, but the four metals of economic value, the nickel, the cobalt, the copper, and the manganese,
Mm-hmm.
all of these are really important metals used in many, many applications. There are rare earths. Rare earths are hot right now, but the percentages are low. But it may be strategically economical if you're already processing the nodules. But right now, we're just assuming nickel, cobalt, copper, and
I
manganese.
see.
I would probably say the nickel and the copper are the most valuable, but cobalt and manganese will also be material.
Well, it's also very fascinating. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to mining, but if I understand correctly, that because it's a commodity, depending on the price of the commodity, certain mines just get either shut down
Yeah,
for operation when the price goes low because it just not doesn't make sense. But if you have four metals, you have a sort of diversification built in where it doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be better sometimes than others, but that would be a nice diversification for you guys there. That's very fascinating. I like this a lot.
yeah.
Look,
I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, also we get the cost benefit. So, most of the nickel mines in Australia have closed because it costs them more to get them out of the ground than the current sell price.
I see.
But if we're 10x less than the current sell price, we've got a lot of protection. And this also gets into geopolitics because China's really good at dumping. So if like a new Western mine is getting close to production, they might dump a lot of material onto the market and crash the price, which then stops the investment.
Yeah, I see. Okay, interesting. I don't want to go down that topic because I don't know how to solve that one. So we'll glaze over that. You did mention it earlier, but could you just restate it because I wasn't able to catch the numbers. How much of this metal do we think is in the ocean?
There is an external report that I can share you that says in this one location between Hawaii and Mexico, it's called the Clarendon-Clipperton Zone. It's a huge area, but it has about over $18 trillion worth of metals just in that one location alone.
Wow, 18 trillion.
Yeah.
That is a big number. I would like to have a little bit of that in my retirement account. All right, so that's good. I appreciate you restating that. So we've already talked a little bit about this, but I just maybe double click on it. I think I don't know how to re-ask the question, but I can imagine that governments are interested in this, right? Especially countries that they want access to another economy or whatnot, or they want to have, secure their own supply chains. Can you just talk about the broader, I guess, market there of what's going on with the governments? What types of countries are really actively pursuing this and looking for partners like you to help them extract it? Like, what are you seeing there generally?
Yeah, I mean, critical minerals are just hot right now. People realize that as we decarbonize our economy, as we grow AI data centers, as we need defense, as we just general infrastructure, we just need a lot more metal. And if you control that source, it gives you huge leverage. It's a bit like in the past, a country controlling oil. There's the wars that are fought over that. And so each country, I would say, has a critical minerals strategy. Some countries have a lot of them in their land, some do not. What's the beauty of the seabed is that most of them are in international waters. They're not really dependent on any one country. And so it's a bit of a land grab of who can get them. And because we haven't done any mining yet, there's the really good stuff, high grade, relatively easy to get available. And so, in the US, you see an executive order from April that President Trump signed and issued, specifically talking about deep sea mining, talking about deregulating, accelerating, providing capital, providing mapping, investing in mineral processing, all of the things that this new industry needs. And you see in Europe, they have their Critical Minerals Act doing things similar. So, I would say almost all countries have a critical minerals strategy. The US and China are probably the two leading with a very active strategy in deep sea. Most just have a generic, but China having the most areas, and now the US with the recent executive order. These are probably the two active countries in the deep sea mining space.
I see.
And the final thing I would say is that, you should think of deep sea mining very much like oil and gas offshore. So in the 1960s, almost all oil and gas was on land, onshore. And then some clever people figured out, well, we could go and drill in the ocean. And now it's a huge part of the market. A third, I think, of all oil and gas comes offshore. The same is going to happen with deep sea. We're hitting a wall with onshore mining. It's just becoming too expensive, taking too long. The grades keep declining.
Yeah.
It makes natural sense that we go to the ocean. It's 71% of our planet. And so it's a bit of a land grab. And I think the next 5 to 10 years will really determine which countries get a win and actually start to control these critical minerals, and which countries are going to be dependent on those that have a leading position.
Clean tech startups need to hire the right talent to hit their milestones, especially in the early days. Without the right team, you'll never make it to your Series A round. And after years of observing this struggle that pre-seed and seed stage clean tech startups have to get the right talent, I decided to create Earth Tech Talent. Our mission is to help clean tech companies hire the best talent so they can succeed and make the world greener. So whether you need some advice on how to craft your talent acquisition strategy, you need to increase your number or quality of applicants, or you need help screening the candidates to save you some time, or you just need traditional headhunting services, reach out today. We have priced everything so that even a pre-seed startup can afford it. Fundamentally, you're only building on clean tech startups because you care about humans. Your hiring process should reflect that. Work with us to craft a hiring process that is human-centered. Doing this will lead to all those job applicants becoming your biggest champions in the public. And even if they get rejected, we make it so that they will still have a positive experience and they'll want to apply again in the future, and they'll be your biggest advocates. To get in touch, reach out to me on LinkedIn or go to earthtechtalent.com/contact. That's Earth, ERTH, techtalent.com/contact. All right, back to the show. Yeah, because the thing I'm just trying to sort through is it seems as though the only thing that truly matters is control of the zones, right? Like if you have the access to work the zone, that's all that really matters. Like if you guys can get that at some point on your own, or again, even if you have to partner with others, that's great. But then there's even a step down that once this becomes very well known, there's going to be probably many competitors who rush in to build robots who are capable of doing this, because if they can't own the zones, they can at least provide the technology to those who do and get some share of revenues. But even further down, it'll just be, hey, you're getting paid a service to lease us your drones, and we're going to get, whoever controls those zones is going to get it. So it's nice to be early. I guess when you hear, I mean, I'm not the first person to tell you this, I'm sure, but when you think through the competition that would probably ensue as this starts to become a much more known situation, what do you think as a founder? Like, how do you go about, like, mentally,
Yeah,
how are we going to defend our moat? Or I don't know, maybe
yeah,
moat's a bad term here, but you know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, definitely we're in the land grab space. 40 licensed areas. If people already have the best spots, there aren't that many left. There will be more discoveries, but you want to get the prime real estate, which
Hmm.
is where we know the highest grade, the highest abundances. So that's one form of moat, and we have our partnerships, we have our own areas. On the tech side, we're really the only company in 50 years to create a new style of collector. I can name, probably 6 or 7 companies that are doing the dredging tractor approach, but we're the only one that's really invented something new. And we've had to invent a lot of new technology. We have patents on it. There's a lot of trade secrets and know-how. It's pretty unique. And
Hmm.
so I don't think you'll see people duplicating that
I see.
anytime soon, because you need very, very specialized skill sets, deep pockets, and then you'd have to work around our IP.
I see. I see. So, I mean, even if people can figure out somewhat, it's going to take some time. It's not like these are just off the shelf parts that you've thrown together and been able to build this.
Yeah,
There's a lot of innovation there. So, no,
yeah,
that's fascinating. It's got to be really exciting to be leading this type of company right now at this particular time. And when I was younger, I used to think a lot about Rockefeller and how he basically had his opportunity because it was such a blue ocean, right? There was nothing, and we're talking about oceans again right now, but there was nothing going on, right? There were so many opportunities. And I was like, oh man, it seems like all those opportunities are gone. But then I started to realize there's always some sort of blue ocean, and you've got the literal blue ocean in front of you right now. So it's quite fascinating to just kind of imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. But I do want to ask one other thing
yeah.
about this myth of the ocean. So I've heard a lot of people say, and I don't know if this is true, that we know more about space than we do about the ocean. Is that true? And like, just give me the
No,
background there.
it's absolutely not true. I mean, maybe it was true, in the 60s, but over the last 50 years, we've mapped about 25% of the ocean to very high resolution. The rest is not mapped at high. So when it comes to how much you know about the ocean, it really depends where. If you pick a random spot in the ocean, we probably don't know very much about it because the ocean is huge. 71% of our planet is ocean. We live on the 29%. So it's so big. If you look from space, our planet looks like a big ocean. That's really what it is. So a random spot, yeah, we don't know much. But you pick one of these 40 licensed areas where companies have spent 50, $60 million over the last couple of decades studying and researching and collecting data. We know a massive amount of data in those areas.
Is there a reason why this myth exists? Like, why do
Yeah.
people say this all the time?
We have a very strong and well resourced environmental group that do not want deep sea mining to start. They are doing everything they can to try to stop the industry from going from the research phase, which we've been in for 50 years, to the actual production phase. And that's one of the myths that they spread, that we don't know anything. And so, how can we make informed
I
decisions?
see.
Despite many of these contractors having areas for over 2 decades and have collected huge amounts of data. And by the way, many of them may be funded by land-based mining.
I was
Now,
gonna ask. Yeah, I was gonna ask. Like, if I was the person who knew about this, I would probably fund that research so that I can get my mining operations in the ocean going first. That's not the case for sure, or we don't know that for sure.
well, the challenge is that, who loses when deep sea mining starts? Well, it's the people that have invested money in this land-based mine
I
that
see.
is 10 times more expensive, because what will happen is the mine will close or not open because it can't compete. And so you have countries like Chile and France that have mining assets that are going to be put out of business, that
Mm,
don't want this industry to start. And so what they do is they encourage NGOs to criticize the effect of the marine environment with the collector technology, and make statements like, we don't know anything and what will be the long-term impacts, when the reality is we do know, but they just don't want to have to compete.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I was That makes whole sense. I guess, are there any other reasons around the environmental side? Because I was assuming that the reason why the NGOs were finding this was because they said, hey, you're gonna ruin the underwater environment. Is that actually part of it? And obviously you guys solved that issue, but is that part of the reason?
I mean, that's the arguments that they put forward, but the science doesn't support that. You always have to do an environmental impact assessment. You have to study the environment for a minimum of 5 years and then describe, depending on what technology you're going to use for the mining, what would be the impact. And then it's the regulator to make that decision because they're the experts. And yet the NGOs don't want that decision to be allowed to be made. They would rather just have a blanket ban or moratorium.
I see. I see. So, okay, I want to ask you before we run out of time. I want to ask you about talent. So, you've obviously built, many companies, and that requires good teams. So, what are your, I guess, core pieces of advice broadly when it comes to hiring?
Take it very seriously. It's much better to take your time than to get bad hires, and there's always pressure. As soon as you close around the funding, the investors are expecting you to grow. But just be very, very selective in who you hire, and always go for the best, because the best people hire other A players. And if you lower the bar, then they will lower the bar when they hire, and suddenly you're a huge corporation that has talent that just isn't as good. The best people can be orders of magnitude better than the average.
Yeah. Did this come naturally to you from the beginning of your building career, or is this something you had to learn the hard way?
I think I learned it the hard way. I've made plenty of hiring mistakes before. I think I have been seduced by someone's resume. That's easy. They worked at Nvidia or some massive company and they had a very senior position. But again, you're hiring for the particular role that you have. And very large companies, although it looks exciting because they have the brand and that company is super successful, that may not be the right person for the stage you're at. Someone that's used to having an org structure with 10 levels of management and doing all the reporting isn't a fit for an early stage startup.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I think I've seen this happen with some people, is that it's very hard to overlook certain experiences versus, hey, what have you actually done and what are the outcomes, right? What phase of company in terms of like growth stage, like very beginning, growth, etc. What is the hardest phase to hire for?
I think very early is hard, but you can kind of get over it with bringing on like co-founders or being very, very generous with the equity. But it's a special type of person that is willing to join when you're very early stage. But I think in general, hiring is always hard. It's never easy.
Yeah, I guess there's obviously a big difference, right? When you're doing maybe a handful of hires early on versus the volume. And this goes into my next question, which is, I guess, number one, how do you attract high performance members or high performing members of your team?
You look for people that are aligned with the mission. Fundamentally, we want people that believe in what we're doing and want to feel good about what we're doing. Because if people buy into the mission, they'll be super motivated. Of course, you have to check that they have the capabilities, they have the talent, but motivation, in my view, is critical. Talent and capabilities is hygiene, right? You've got to have it. If you haven't got it, you can't do the job. But a well-motivated engineer versus someone that could be incredibly smart, but just isn't interested, just really is there for the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
That's night and day different.
How much of motivation is internal from the talent themselves versus from kind of external from the founder?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, as a founder and a leader, you have to kind of sell people on the vision. You have to get them excited, but they also have to buy into that. I mean, it's my job to communicate and show, but they have to take a leap of faith and believe the world is going to be as we think it will in the future.
But there has to be also some sort of click that happens during the interview process where when you talk about the vision, it does start to make sense, right? Like, or they already have heard about your vision because of the things you've mentioned, publicly, and it's already clicked by the time they apply, right? It's
Yeah,
not
in an
it's not
ideal
something that's
world,
completely manufactured.
yeah, in an ideal world, it's the latter, right? You've been able to communicate, you've been transparent, people are aware of you. We've been able to have, I think, a reasonable profile. So people are beginning to learn about us, and we're not always hiring, but we almost every week we get someone, cold email kind of saying, "I'd love to join you."
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think I want to join you after this, man. This is exciting stuff here. I want to be a pirate of the sea. Final piece on the talent then is once you have attracted a high performance team, especially at the early stages, how do you maintain that team as it grows? Like, how do you make sure that they keep being high performing? Because usually it's difficult.
Yeah, culture. I mean, you've got to build a culture where there's trust, transparency. We do things like after every board meeting, which is once a quarter, we present the slides to the whole team. So everyone sees the same communications, what we're doing. We have a very open, transparent culture where everybody can basically see everything, and unless there's a strict legal reason why not.
Yeah. Do you find that it's hard for high performing people to work together as a team because they're so high performing, or do they typically fall in line with the mission? If they're mission aligned, they fall in line with like rowing the boat in the same direction.
Yeah, I think they fall in line. I mean, we're not a massive team. We're about 20 people, including some part time. So it's still relatively small.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think people believe in what we're doing,
Yeah.
in that it's the right thing for society. We're solving quite tough technical problems that have never been done before. Engineers love to do that. It's
Yeah.
partly why we came up with the name. It was like, well, everyone says what we're trying to do just can't be done. It's impossible. So let's prove them wrong. That's motivating. And then, of course, everyone gets stock options. And so if we can build the company of the scale, I think we will, it will be life changing from a compensation standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Some of the upside is nice there, right? So let's try to wrap up with this. I mean, you've obviously built many companies. Do you have any general advice when it comes to fundraising for other founders?
I think clarity of story is really important. It's you know your business intimately well, but investors spend minutes or seconds when they're doing a first screen. So trying to really simplify the message and don't focus on aesthetics, focus on clarity. Because sometimes you could hire a designer and make your collateral look super pretty, but it loses in the ease of understanding.
Hmm.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I appreciate that. I think I would just want to encourage people to re-listen to that, right? Focus on clarity and not aesthetics, right? I think that this is if you can't boil down your company into very simple statements, it means you don't understand it or you haven't thought deeply about how to pitch it because it all is there in your mind. But if you can't communicate it properly, how are you going to hire people? How are you going to convince investors, et cetera? So that makes sense. Any particular advice on how to construct a cap table or what particularly to avoid?
Well, I mean, basic stuff. I think everyone should be vesting. If you bring on advisors or employees, vesting, you don't want to give people shares all in one go. You want to vest them typically over 4 years. That's good. I think advisors can be really helpful for you. Senior people in the industry, they can help with connections. They can help you with strategy and bringing some of them on early on is a good thing to do. But again, do it with a vesting schedule.
Got it. And with this space in particular, are there any grant funding or non-dilutive opportunities that you're seeing out there?
There should be. We've unlocked a little bit, but I think longer term, I think there will be substantial opportunities, but that's probably in 18 months' time.
And you don't see a lot of governments being willing to pay for the pilots up front just to forward the cost of your hardware just because they're so interested in the technology and being able to extract.
So, Department of Energy has ARPA-E, which is kind of their advanced research. So they will fund some R&D, but it takes quite a while to go through. You're looking probably minimum 6 months. And so that's the challenge, because you typically don't stand still. So if you write your grant application, you may have done what you said by the time it comes.
if you're doing things the right way, at least, right? If you're not just sitting around.
Yeah. So, previous company, we got quite a bit of money from National Science Foundation, NSF, which is good grants because you can basically put your own idea out there. So there definitely is, but it's not free money, right? The grant application is quite involved, and it takes quite a while. And then there's reporting. So it's nice to have if it's what you're doing anyway, but there's definitely overhead. It will take time and money to make it happen.
Yeah, makes sense. And then with the way you're looking at growing, do you foresee that you'll be able to use debt or other financing options to grow the company a lot, or is it a lot of it going to come from equity? And maybe just also recap us where you're at in terms of the scale of how many robots you have and how many you're building.
Yeah, I mean, we've only done actually a pre-seed and a seed round to date. So we've raised just around $15 million to date. We are looking to do a Series A, about a 30 million raise, and that should be our last equity round. So we will need a Series B to build the fleet of robots to go mining, maybe start with 15. Maybe we'll need $100 million to build that fleet, operate the ships, set up the mineral processing. But we don't intend to use equity. We think debt or customer financing or leasing or government grants, these are kind of the mix. I'm a bit wary of debt. I think first of its kind projects, debt isn't a good instrument. Banks typically want to see comps. They want to see comparables, which you don't often have for first of its kind. But follow on, our first 15 robots, maybe we'll get our customers to pay for that as a pre-purchase with a discount. But the extension of the fleet, then debt could be a perfect instrument. Now, if the government will give me a loan guarantee, which is something it does, then debt becomes more valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think it's really interesting with these hardware companies that, especially if it's something at scale where it's not like, we're not just building a handful of units, we're building hundreds or thousands of units. It's very fascinating to see when you can get to that point where it then clicks, and some of the financing mechanisms along the way, like you said, and in this case, maybe some people will pay for them up front because, hey, we've proven that we can do this, in our garage, or I shouldn't say garage, it's probably, a more sophisticated facility than that, but we can build these ourselves. And now, we can at least guarantee this. Maybe we won't be as fast, but you can purchase those from us directly, and we'll get this thing moving, and then move up into scaled production. So I find this fascinating. I think we're a little bit over time now. We've covered pretty much everything I wanted to, though. So I think this is really good. You did great at giving us concise answers and getting all this information shared. So just the last thing would be, what are you most excited for in the coming months, and any other call that you want to make at the end of the episode here?
Yeah, I mean, short term, we're working on a new 3D animation that kind of explains some of the new technology we've invented. Our current animation doesn't actually show how the on-ship stuff works, the battery swap and the crane and the maintenance. So I'm excited to get that out maybe in the next month. But going forward, we'll be doing more deep water testing. We'll be building and testing Eureka 3 next year, which is the full production system. So really excited about that.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated to see how you guys develop. I'll make sure I turn on notifications on your LinkedIn posts, because this is going to be really exciting to see. Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to the continued developments, and we'll see how the world receives this.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us 5 stars on your favorite podcast player. And if you really liked it, share it with some other people you think might also find it fascinating. And if you really, really liked it, give us a share on social media. That way the algorithm can do its thing. And don't forget to sign up for the Hack Summit returning to New Lab December 10th and 11th. This is a gathering of about 500 investors, founders, and operators in climate deep tech. It's going to be really awesome. We're going to be creating content there, so be sure to sign up below. And then another shout out to our sponsors, Earth Tech Talent, the search firm that I run, helping clean tech startups hire top talent, but without it costing a fortune. and climate finance solutions, helping clean tech startups land grant funding, and other non-dilutive funding options in the US and Europe. All right, thank you so much for tuning in to Clean Techies. We'll see you next time.